And now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our opening keynote speaker for our first session. He is a global guru top 30 thought leader and a member of the MG 100 coaches, a speaker, an educator, a disruptor, a team builder, and an executive coach. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. David Cohen.
Thank you. What do you do these days? Who knows? Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here. This is my first flight that was more than 3 hours long. And the first time I put a suit on, I was afraid it'd be too small. Turned out to be too large. Turns out I lost 15 pounds, about 10 kilos during this period of time. I want to talk this morning and sort of kick it off by sharing with you something that everybody in the audience already knows. We're already in this together. The problem is, how do you get your senior leaders, how do you get your teammates, how do you get your executive team to understand that life is never going to return to the way it was? Because if they keep the old mindset, you are going to wind up with disgruntled employees that are going to leave. It's already being called the Great Resignation. And it's being called the Great Resignation because people have woken up and have begun to understand that life has changed and things are more important. So let me begin by looking at putting this in perspective. Who here remembers the word personnel? Because that's how we started in the 1930s. HR was called personnel. And personnel had two reasons to exist: to find new employees and to keep the CEO out of jail. That was its only existence. To find new employees, because when it began in the United States and in Europe, it was pre-union times and they were trying to break unions. So a lot of people were injured. So they had to replace those workers. And so if we go forward, HR has taken a windy road. Now, I myself have taken a windy road. I started out living in the United States. 34 years ago, I moved to Canada. So I am known as an American by birth, Canadian by choice. And the reality is that I started in education. And then I transferred to the world of consulting and coaching. So I've taken my own windy road. But HR has taken a lot of forms. The problem with HR is, for ourselves, is we have an identity crisis. And you have to put that to rest. The identity crisis is simple. We keep changing our name. We were personnel, we were human resources, we're talent management, we are people and culture, we are in employee experience, employee engagement. We keep changing our identity, and therefore, people aren't quite sure who we are. It got to the point where Fast Company actually had 15 years ago a cover that created a lot of grief. I was at a big conference in San Diego, about 5,000 people there, when this came out. And half the group said, hallelujah, it's about time somebody told the truth. And the other half were insulted. So the question is HR, to stick with that term, a trusted partner by the executives? Is HR a trusted partner by the employees? See, we have 2 feet, one in each camp. And if we begin to advocate for one, the other feels we're against them. HR needs to take a stand. HR needs to be different than it was in the past. This is the most important time for those of us who lead people in organizations. And the reason is we are more needed now than ever before. We are more important today as HR leaders than in the history of our existence, because organizations are based on people. Carnegie said something that I think is really important. And he said that with his steel factories, I can have a steel factory and it can, my people can leave and the factory will crumble and nothing will happen. The factory will crumble and my people will stay, and I will build a bigger and better factory. There's a need for people to understand that strategy is only as good as the people who execute it. You can have a strategy that you can take to any business school in the world, and it can get an A for your class grade. And it will fail if you give it to your people. The best example of that is FedEx. We've all heard of FedEx. FedEx is a global organization. Smith, the founder of FedEx, gave a paper in his MBA course, and there was a strategic plan to create FedEx. And he got a C-. He was told by the professor it would fail. And for $5,000 borrowed from his family, he put together FedEx. Did it fail? No. Which is always a warning to everybody, be careful what academics tell you. So let's take a look at this. What is today's reality? Today's reality is a new starting point for leadership. Today's reality is grown out of an emotional crisis. And that emotional crisis does not have to be because one of your neighbors, one of your friends, God forbid, one of your family members died of COVID or got very ill of COVID and is having post-COVID issues. Having lived through this pandemic, which is still going on, everybody's gone through crisis. It has given the world, it has given people a new perspective. And that new perspective is based on, whether you know it or not, whether you admit it or not, everybody's living through PTSD. We are all, in some degree, questioning something. And that questioning comes to everybody. Your CEOs, your general managers, your ministers, your directors are not exempt from this experience. Here's the problem. How does it manifest itself? How do you know things have changed? In the master class, I'm going to talk a lot in the morning about culture and values and leadership. But the one important thing about this is that we all have a set of values. We all have beliefs, lots of beliefs. The things that are values are those things we will not violate. The rest are beliefs. The reality is beliefs, values do not change. They evolve very slowly. We know that we have been successful in transferring our values to our children when our children have children and their little ones do something, which is what kids do. And our child, our daughter, our son, here's this little boy, says something to their child, and this little voice in the back of their head says, I promised when I was a parent I'd never say that. You are your parents. And that's how values are transmitted. Except for one thing happens in the world. It's known as a significant emotional event. And a significant emotional event will change our belief system without us even knowing it. You need to help your leadership understand if they have been going through an SEE, a significant emotional event. Because if they don't articulate that to their employees will continue to behave in what they thought were the right way, and suddenly leadership will say, I don't like that anymore. And now we have our conflict. So we need to make people aware. Our job as senior talent people are to be very agile, to be totally sensitive, to be emotionally agile, be intuitive and mindful of other people's thoughts, because other people's thoughts are changing without them even knowing it. So this is a road that we're on, and we're basically at a crossroads. We can have leaders that want to go back to the way it was. And there's a firm that I work with in New York, one of the major brokerage firms. And the CEO decided nothing's changed, the world has not changed, everybody's going back to work. Everybody's going back to work. The world as it was. He's so oblivious. 30% of his staff quit. These are major brokers, these are analysts, these are people at all levels of the organization. They all quit. Some of them moved outside of New York City, didn't want to move back to New York City. Some of them were afraid to go back to the physical workplace. But they quit. He had a crisis. We worked through how to overcome that, because things will never return to the way they are. So these are the two major problems that you're facing. The two major problem is people will leave your organization because they have new priorities in life. I was at a conference in Las Vegas for SHRM in the beginning of September, and this woman from the US Navy comes up to me and says, I have a problem. Can you help me salvage a nuclear scientist who's worked for 25 years on submarines? And I said, what do you mean? He turned in his resignation. Now, he wasn't planning on resigning. He wasn't planning at all on resigning. He was on the succession planning track. But he came in and gave them the resignation. I said, so why is he leaving? He is quitting to go to North Carolina to start a mushroom farm, which has been his life's ambition. And what he's learned from the pandemic, if he doesn't do it now, he'll never do it. So there are people that are going to be in your organization that are going to say they are gone. Do not offer them more money, because they're not leaving for money. Show them the door. Say thank you very much for your service. Because if you try to keep them, they'll be gone in 6 months to a year anyhow. And then you got a bigger problem. Because for that 6 months, they are retired in place, and productivity from them is almost zero. Do not try to hold on to them. That's one issue. Or people will be leaving organizations, and that's why it's been called the Great Resignation. In the United States in April, the US Department of Statistics, Labor Statistics, said 6 million people quit their jobs. Not retired, not fired, quit their jobs. The other issue is work from home or work from the office. The only way to solve that is to ask your employees what they want to do. Do not let yourself or senior leaders make that decision without involving the people who work on the front line. Put together a process of design thinking. Allow them to have a voice, because them making a decision own the voice, own the decision, not you. And what happens when you own the decision? You're more committed. Will that decision be vastly different from what you want? Maybe. But allow them to have a voice in that decision. The other thing that we have to do as CHROs in this world today is to become an equal voice with the CEO and the CFO. There needs to be a three-legged stool created that no decision, no strategy is taken unless all three people have had a say. HR for too long has been told this is going to happen without the impact of what it means HR. I was working with a major international automaker, parts supplier, biggest in the world, Magna. And Magna was given this great deal in Mexico. They didn't involve HR in the decision-making process. They got this government grant from the Mexican government to build a plant in the middle of nowhere. It was basically going to cost them nothing to build it. They're in the process of building it. They go to HR and they say, we have to hire 42 engineers. HR laughed hysterically and said within 100 kilometers, the average education level is grade 5. There's one engineer in the entire area, and he's happily working. They never finished the plant. Now that's an example to me of why the CFO, the CEO, and the CHRO have to say, if we are going to spend money, if we're going to invest in something, if we're going to do something, if we don't talk about it beforehand, in the end, it's people that are going to cause the problem. Like the Andrew Carnegie incident, if you give it to the people, they'll rebuild it better than they found it. So this becomes the next major topic everybody's focused on, resilience. Resilience is really simple. The ability to bounce back. The ability to overcome difficulties and adversity. Immanuel Fackenheim, who survived the Holocaust, was a professor of philosophy at the University of Toronto, said the reason people are resilient and survive is they have meaning and purpose of something significant yet to do. You know, every one of you work in an important organization, and every one of you adds value to your country. But do your employees feel that they are something significant yet to do, that without them that will not happen? I'll give you another quick story. I was working with Sanofi Pasteur. Sanofi's motto was, they make vaccines, Sanofi's motto was this: to make the world safer for children through vaccines. I'm working when doing a focus group with the janitorial staff. And the janitorial staff said to me, we are the most important people in this building. 2 Nobel scientists are in the building. They said with passion, if we don't clean up a bathroom, if we don't make this place safe, one of those scientists gets a concussion and we delayed cancer research for a year. We are the most important people in this building. So resilience is about giving a sense of ownership, giving a sense of purpose to your frontline staff and everybody in between. Now, there's 2 kinds of resilience, actually 3. There's organizational resilience, which this slide addresses. There's leadership resilience, and there's personal resilience. Organizational resilience comes this way. First, you need to know, what is your labor demand? What jobs exist today that won't exist tomorrow? What jobs which are essential today will be necessary tomorrow but not essential? What are the skill base of those? What are the capability of those people we have today? What is the gap analysis? We need to be able to connect workers at scale that we know that when they're needed, they will be ready. Some cases it might be right away and you got to go outside the organization. Sometimes it's another year or 2, go inside. Always go inside. Research is clear. When you promote from inside, the person is always more successful, especially in senior leadership. Develop your staff. Accelerate learning. See, right now I have a real problem because when I talk to organizations around the world, what have they stopped doing? Remote learning. Now, I teach at a college in Canada, and for the last 2 years, we've had remote learning. Does it work? Yeah. You got to get creative. It's more exhausting than teaching in person. It can't last more than 4 hours. But yes, you can make it work. Which then leads to this. Fostered shared resilience. In other words, the purpose of our organization in the future is to do this. For those of you who have been around HR for a long time, they used to call that vision. The new name is purpose. Install gratitude in your organization. One of the biggest complaints I hear from employees is nobody around here says thank you. Not one senior leader. They pass me by, they don't even know who I am. There's no gratitude in this organization. They don't want money. They want to thank you for surviving this with them. And the last one is social connections. In the Gulf region, I studied cultures of different geographic regions, and I would say in the Gulf region, more than any place else, human connection, face-to-face connection is essential. There are 2 issues to that. It has to be physiologically and psychologically safe. Anybody who thinks, right now there's a bank in Canada, TD Bank, and Rogers Communication, they've taken all of their customer service call center people and they told them they're never coming back to work. You call them for a question, a complaint, you hear how upset they are. They want to go back to work, at least 2 days a week. None of them want to go back to work 5 days a week. But they want to go back to work. Social connections are essential. What do you need to do to create that resilience is to make sure that you teach your leadership staff active mindfulness. Now, I know that sounds really touchy-feely. That's really a soft skill. It's the hardest thing they can possibly do. There's nothing soft about it. The other thing that leaders are going to have to do is detachment breaks. One thing I've heard from a couple of people I know that work in the region, you're overworking your employees. They're working too long, too hard, too many demands, without any breaks, without any gratitude, without any understanding that there's purpose to what they're doing. You need detachment breaks. People have to get away. Mental agility, compassion, and empathy is an essential ingredient for success. Remain ethical. It is very easy under these difficult times to do the wrong thing in the name of success. But your employees are watching that, and as soon as you step out of line, they're going to say, hey, why should I work here? They don't believe that. Why they do that? They're going to treat me like that. And find purpose, find meaning. Make sure that your frontline staff knows that. Now, I know you can't read these slides, but take a look at the blue area. From an employer's point of view, you, the bosses, from your point of view, the things most important that you're focused on are all the wrong things. You're focused on compensation. Let's start to increase salaries, keep them happy. Looking for new work, poor health conditions, improve those things. Development opportunities, working remotely, and we are afraid that our good people are headhunted away. But when I ask employees what they want from their leaders, whoops, it just jumped. Those are exactly the same details in both slides. People want flexible schedules. They want potential to advance. See, right now, if I'm working remotely, how does my boss know who I am? Will I ever get advancement? You need to address that. I need to have a better view of the organization. I need to be valued by my manager. I need to be valued by my boss. So, let me leave you with this. As people leaders, there are two types of things that you have to focus on and build the behaviors of yourself and your leadership team. The most important one is senior leaders have to become employee champions. What does that mean? They have to mentor, they have to coach, and they have to one-on-one pay attention to their people. They need to become people advocates. They need to find opportunities for people to do things they're interested in that they never did before. They have to be able to have the courage to do the right thing and say the right thing and not let your colleagues make a decision that violates the values of your culture. You see, HR has always complained about having a seat at the table. In other words, at the table, we don't say anything. The most important thing you can say is speak up and talk truth to power. The most important thing you can do is have the courage to point out when the leadership team will be violating its values. So here are the behaviors that you got to focus on as leaders, HR leaders. You have to put together a talent strategy based on your values. Every organization has a set of values, even if they haven't defined them. And they don't change. I was talking with a senior person, a friend of mine, at the United States Postal Office. And I said, do you think that Ben Franklin, who 250 years ago founded the post office, if his values are still the values of the postal office. He looked at me and said, no. So I said, let's take a look at it. What were some of the founding documents of the post office? What was his belief system? And sure enough, there's a line of DNA that lasted 250 years. Of course, DNA of values don't change in organization. They evolve, they moderate. In my book, Inside the Box, I have a speech by Thomas Edison and a speech by Jack Welch, and I asked the reader, which one's Thomas Edison and which one's Jack Welch, and you can't tell them apart. That's why Jack Welch was good for GE, and GE was good for Jack Welch, but Jack Welch was good for nobody. Right? They called him Neutron Jack for a reason. Focus on employee wellness. I can't say that enough. Focus on employee wellness. Be a key strategic partner with your CEO, COO, and CFO. Empathy and compassion. Be aware that some of your employees have family members somewhere in the world that died of COVID. They are not the same person today. They might get very emotional at work for no apparent reason, but if you are empathetic and understanding, you will know and support them, and they will work for you forever. If you give them a hard time, they're gone. Compassion is critical at this point in time. And lead by example by role modeling resilience. Show that you are bouncing back. Show that you see a positive future. Resilience is about building a hopeful, positive future. These are the two most important words. I do a lot of work with organizations on employee experience. Employee engagement is a thing of the past. Employee engagement means you have fun games, you have parties, you have this. But think of it this way. You have a boss that yelled and screamed at you, gave you a hard time, put pressure on you. You had a party. What are you going to go home and talk to your parents and your family about? The fun time, the good food, or the fact your boss yelled at you? The employee experience is more important than employee engagement. It's based on two things. I trust my boss. I respect my boss. I believe my boss respects me and trusts me. And I believe senior management will always make decisions based on the values, norms of the organization. Any questions? Quiet group, early in the morning. Should we do exercises? Believe me, right now, I find it a little hot outside. I live in Canada for a reason. Okay, any questions? Anybody? I'm here for 3 days. Please come see me. Glad to talk to you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. David Cohen.